The cry cut through the storm like a knife. It wasn't the wind howling or the distant rustle of trees bending under the weight of snow. It was something alive. Mike froze mid-step, his heart pounding in his chest. In the dead of winter, in the middle of a snowstorm, that sound didn't belong. Without a second thought, he grabbed the flashlight and threw on his coat. The night was brutal, the wind slashing at his face as he stumbled toward the henhouse. He tightened his grip on the handle, dreading what he might find. Another wild animal, maybe, though deep down he already knew this was something else. Reaching the door, Mike hesitated for only a moment before pushing it open. Inside, the chickens were unsettled, clucking nervously, and there it was. A small, swaddled bundle nestled in the hay, its tiny cries barely audible over the storm. His breath caught as the flashlight's beam settled on it. A baby, Jesus, he whispered, kneeling beside the child. His hands, rough and trembling, brushed away the cloth. The baby's face was red from the cold, its lips trembling, but it was alive. Who could have done this? Cradling the infant to his chest, Mike bolted back toward the house, shielding the child as best he could from the biting wind. His mind raced. There was no one around for miles, no one who could have left the baby out here. The cold was too deadly. This was abandonment, pure and simple. The door slammed behind him as he stumbled into the warmth of the kitchen. Jennifer, his wife, looked up from her chair by the fire, her knitting falling to the floor. "Mike," she called, her voice thick with concern. "What's going on?" He moved quickly toward her, peeling away the ragged cloth. "I found him in the henhouse." Jennifer's eyes widened in shock as she stood up, stepping toward him. "A baby!" she breathed, her hands hovering over the infant like she wasn't sure she should touch him. "In this storm, just lying there. No sign of anyone," Mike said, his voice low and urgent. "I don't know who could have done it." Jennifer took the baby gently from his arms, cradling him with a tenderness that seemed to wash away the shock of the moment. Her face softened as she looked down at the child. "He's freezing," she whispered. "How long do you think he was out there?" "Too long," Mike muttered, pacing the kitchen. "We need to find out who left him. Take him to the authorities or—" "No," Jennifer interrupted, her voice firm. She looked up at him, eyes blazing with a sudden, fierce protectiveness. "No, Mike, we can't just hand him over. Not after this." Mike stopped, glancing between her and the baby. He knew that look. Jennifer had been longing for a child for years, and now this fragile, abandoned infant, was stirring something in her he hadn't seen in a long time. "Jen," he started cautiously, "we don't even know where he came from, and we might never know," she replied sharply. "But this baby needs us. Whoever left him out there didn't care if he lived or died." Mike hesitated. He wasn't ready for this. Hell, neither of them were. But looking at the baby, now quiet in Jennifer's arms, a small part of him felt something. A sense of purpose, maybe. Or fear. "What are we going to do?" he asked quietly, stepping closer. Jennifer smiled softly, brushing a finger against the baby's tiny cheek. "We're going to raise him, Mike. We'll give him a family." Mike nodded slowly, still uncertain but feeling the pull. "All right," he murmured. "What do we call him?" Jennifer thought for a moment, her gaze softening as the baby stirred in her arms. "Alex," she said, finally. "His name is Alex." Outside the window, the storm is still raging, but inside, a hidden storm is about to hit Mike and Jennifer's family, something they could not have predicted. Nestled between hills and rivers, it appeared untouched by time, a place where life moved slowly. But for Mike and Jennifer, life inside their modest cottage had sped up in ways they couldn't comprehend. It had been just a month since Alex had entered their lives, but he no longer resembled the frail newborn they had brought home during that fierce snowstorm. As Mike leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Jennifer feed Alex, His thoughts churned. The boy looked like he was 8 months old, strong, alert, crawling across the floor with ease. Yet he was only a few weeks into life. "This isn't normal," Mike said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, careful. He didn't want to startle Jennifer, though he knew his words carried a weight she could feel. Jennifer, her back turned to him, sighed softly as she cradled Alex in her arms. "All children grow at different rates, Mike. You know that." Mike crossed the room, his arms folding tightly over his chest as he stopped beside her. "I'm not talking about a growth spurt. He's crawling, he's talking. He's barely a month old." His eyes flicked to Alex, who was now gurgling and babbling incoherent sounds, his tiny hand reaching out to grasp Mike's sleeve. Jennifer smiled down at the boy. "It's extraordinary, I'll admit, but worrying won't help." Mike glanced out the window. The wind was picking up, and the dark clouds on the horizon mirrored the unease building inside him. "It's not just me, Jen. The neighbors are talking. Peter saw him the other day, and now the whole village knows." Jennifer's smile faded. "Peter? The one who's always peeking over the fence?" Mike nodded. "Yeah, and it's not just him. The rumors are spreading fast. People are whispering, calling him unnatural." Jennifer shifted Alex in her arms, her face tightening. "They're scared. They see a baby growing too fast and start making up stories. It's how people react to what they don't understand." Mike's jaw tightened. "It's not just the rumors. The storms, the locusts. Everything started happening right after we found him." Jennifer stood, taking a step toward him, her eyes serious. "You're not saying you believe them, are you?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Mike muttered, turning back to the window as the first raindrops splattered against the glass. "But I know this can't go on much longer. The village is on edge. If they start blaming him for everything—" "They won't," Jennifer interrupted, her voice firm but soft. "He's just a baby. Our baby." But Mike wasn't so sure. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Inside, the tension grew as Alex's strange abilities continued to challenge everything they thought they knew about the world. The sun was setting behind the rolling hills, casting long shadows over the village. The air felt thick with tension, as though the ground itself trembled under the weight of unspoken fear. Mike stood at the window, staring out at the distant fields where dark clouds gathered. He could hear the murmur of voices, the occasional crack of a stick breaking underfoot as the villagers gathered outside. It had been weeks since the last storm had torn through the crops, leaving destruction in its wake. And now, more bad luck has followed. Pests, illness, even drought. The villagers had long whispered about Alex, the boy Mike found and taken in. They saw him as the source of their misfortune. "Mike, they're coming," his wife Jennifer said quietly from behind him, her voice steady but strained. She clutched a frying pan close to her chest, as if that would somehow protect them from what was coming. "I won't let them take him," Mike replied, not turning to face her. His hands clenched into fists at his side. "He's our son now." Outside, the murmur had grown into a full chorus of angry voices. The villagers were no longer content to mutter in corners. They had gathered at the front of his house, torches flickering in the twilight, casting eerie glows on their grim faces. Mike pushed open the door and stepped out. The cool evening breeze did little to soothe his rising tension. He faced the crowd, meeting their eyes. These were people he had known his whole life, neighbors, friends even. But now, fear has turned them into something unrecognizable. "Mike," a man from the crowd spoke, his voice low but laced with anger. "We've given you enough time. You've seen what's happening to the village. The boy needs to go." Mike shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. "He's not the cause of any of this. He's just a child. You can't blame him for what nature brings." A woman from the back stepped forward, her face twisted with a mix of fear and rage. "Ever since you adopted him, this village has suffered nothing but suffering. The storms, the pests, the drought. It's him. It has to be him." Mike stood firm. "You're wrong. This village has seen bad times before. You know that. Blaming Alex won't change anything." The crowd shifted uneasily, but their resolve held. The man who had spoken earlier took a step closer, raising his voice. "The storm brought the boy to this, Lang. That was a bad omen. You have one last chance, Mike. Either the boy leaves, or we'll take matters into our own hands." Mike's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood his ground. "You'll have to go through me first." The crowd hesitated. The threat hung heavy in the air, like the storm clouds overhead. Without another word, the villagers turned and walked away. But Mike knew this was far from over. The real storm was still coming. As he turned back toward the house, he felt Jennifer's hand on his arm. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mike glanced at the darkening sky, then down at the door where Alex watched silently, wide-eyed. "We hold on," he said, "and we protect our son." Alex sat by the window, his silhouette stark against the dying light of the evening. From this angle, he could see the vast fields beyond the village, now dry and lifeless. The crops had shriveled under the relentless sun, and the cattle, once strong and plentiful, now lay as mere shadows of their former selves. He clenched his fists, sensing the tension that had gripped the village in the last few weeks. It wasn't just the drought. He knew, deep down, that they blamed him. Inside the modest home, Mike paced back and forth, while Jennifer stood by the doorway, her gaze shifting uneasily between Alex and her husband. "He's just a boy, Mike," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the room's heavy silence. Mike stopped, turning to face her. His face was etched with worry, deep lines forming over his once youthful features. "He looks like a man, Jennifer. He's only been with us 2 years." He trailed off, staring out the window at Alex. "People talk. They've been talking for a long time." Jennifer sighed, her fingers tightening around the edge of the door. "Let them talk. We know Alex isn't to blame for the drought. It's just bad timing." Mike shook his head. "I don't understand. They think Alex is cursed. Some of them. They're starting to lose their minds. They're telling strange stories about a mysterious person who found underground water." Jennifer interrupted. "He saved the village, didn't he?" "That's exactly the problem," Mike muttered, his voice low. "That makes them more and more convinced that Alex is a bad omen. So God brought the Savior as they prayed." Mike sighed. "Worried they will come tonight. I can feel it." Jennifer's heart sank. She had noticed the murmurs in the marketplace, the sidelong glances, and the whispers that followed them wherever they went. She had hoped, prayed even, that it would pass. But now, standing in the threshold of their home, the weight of what Mike was saying crushed any lingering optimism. "I won't let them take him," she said softly, but with a resolve that surprised even her. Alex told Mom lovingly. "You don't need to protect me," he said, his voice deeper than any boy his age should have. "I'll leave if it keeps you safe." Jennifer rushed over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No, you won't. You're part of this family, Alex. We chose you." "But they won't stop," Alex replied, his eyes meeting hers for the first time that evening. "I can hear them sometimes. In the distance. They say I don't belong here, that I bring ruin wherever I go." Before Jennifer could respond, a low rumble echoed through the air outside. The flicker of torches could be seen approaching in the darkening sky. The villagers were coming. Mike stood by the door, gripping the handle tightly. "Stay inside," he ordered, his voice tense. "I'll deal with this." But as the shouts grew louder, the sense of inevitability weighed heavy in the room. The night air was thick with tension, a chorus of murmurs and shuffling feet as the villagers gathered outside Mike's home. The crackle of the flames mixed with the murmur of angry voices, creating a low hum of danger. They were a crowd driven by fear, their faces hard with determination, their hands gripping makeshift weapons, sticks, stones, anything to make themselves feel powerful against what they didn't understand. "They're coming, Mike," Jennifer whispered, her voice taut with worry. She peered out through the window, her hands trembling on the sill. "I see them," Mike replied, keeping his voice steady. "We need to hide him. Now." Jennifer nodded, her eyes flickering towards the back of the house. Alex was crouched near the doorway, his eyes wide, but calm. "Go, Alex," Jennifer urged, guiding him towards the back. "To the livestock shed. They won't find you there." "I don't want you to get hurt," Alex muttered, but his feet moved, following his mother's direction. "We'll be fine," Mike assured him, though there was a crack in his voice. "Just go. We'll talk to them. We'll calm them down." But as the distant voices grew louder, it was clear that reasoning wouldn't work tonight. The mob was a tide of anger and fear, and it was already rolling towards them. Mike stepped outside before the crowd could reach the door. He held up his hands in a placating gesture, trying to keep his voice steady. "What do you want?" he called out. A man from the front of the group, his face contorted with rage, stepped forward. "You know what we want, Mike," he snarled. "That boy of yours, he's the cause of this. Everything's been going downhill since he came. If you hand him over, maybe the village will be saved." Mike stood firm, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "Alex is just a boy," he said, though even he knew that wasn't entirely true anymore. Alex had grown quickly, too quickly, his body defying the natural order of things. It wasn't his fault, but it was hard to explain away. "He's not normal," another voice shouted from the back. "Look at the crops, the storm, all the animals we've lost. It's him. He's cursed." "You can't believe that," Mike protested, but the crowd surged forward a step, emboldened by their collective fear. Torches were raised higher, casting flickering light across grim faces. "Get out of our way, Mike," the leader growled, "or we'll burn this place down." Before Mike could respond, Alex stepped out from the shadows of the shed. The boy, no, the young man, stood tall, his face calm but his eyes blazing with defiance. "Stop!" Alex called out, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The crowd stilled, momentarily shocked by the sight of him. Alex, who should have been a child, stood before them like a fully grown adult, his frame solid, his expression eerily composed. "I'm not afraid of you," Alex continued, stepping forward. "But don't hurt them. This isn't their fault. If you want someone, take me." For a moment there was only silence, the crowd staring at him as though he were a ghost. Mike took a step forward, his heart pounding. He wanted to protect his son, but he could see it in their eyes. This was what they had feared all along. Alex wasn't just a boy anymore, and to them, that made him something monstrous. Alex's appearance made the crowd grow restless, a boiling mass of fear and confusion. Some people muttered in fear, "It's a monster." Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the gathering, walking with a calm, purposeful stride. His presence cut through the tension, making the villagers instinctively part to let him pass. He wore a long, dark coat, and in his hand a worn leather briefcase. The man's voice, steady and authoritative, broke the clamor. "Stop this madness," he said firmly. "I'm Robert, a geneticist. Mike asked me to come here to explain what's truly happening with Alex." The crowd murmured, but stilled. Eyes darted between Robert and Mike, waiting for some explanation for the fear that had gripped them for so long. I understand your concern, Robert continued, scanning the faces of the villagers. But what you fear is not the result of curses or supernatural forces. It's science. Alex suffers from a rare condition called progeria, a genetic disorder that causes his body to age rapidly. The villagers were not fully grasping what Robert was saying. He could see the doubt in their eyes, the long-held beliefs in curses and bad omens still gripping them. Progeria, Robert repeated, is a disease. Nothing more. It causes those who have it to age much faster than normal. This is why Alex looks older, stronger than a child his age should. But he's still just a boy. No evil spirits, no bad omens. Just a boy with a medical condition. The words hung in the air, sinking slowly into the collective consciousness of the crowd. Some looked at each other, confused, while others seemed to cling to their superstitions. Robert's explanation, though logical, was a far cry from the stories they'd told themselves. "That's him." A voice broke through the muttering crowd. It was an older man, weathered by time and labor, his voice trembling. He was the one who found water for us during the drought. That young man saved our village when no one else could. The crowd turned, eyes widening in recognition. Whispers swept through the villages as more people began to remember and realized Alex was their savior. One by one, the villagers lowered their torches. Apologies began to form on their lips. The air of hostility faded as guilt and shame took its place. The older woman who had first suggested getting rid of Alex now stood silent, eyes cast downward. We didn't know," she stammered, stepping forward. "We were wrong." Mike stepped out further from his home, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. He glanced at Robert, then back at the villagers. Alex has never been a curse. He's been a blessing to this village from the moment he arrived. The silence that followed was heavy, but not with fear, rather with the weight of reconciliation. The fear that had blinded them dissipated, and in its place came a hesitant yet growing acceptance. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Robert turned to Mike. "It'll take time, but they'll come around. Science may not heal old beliefs overnight, but it helps open doors." Mike nodded, looking back at his son, who stood quietly by the window, his figure dimly outlined by the evening light. Alex had done more for the village than they had ever understood. And now, at last, the truth was beginning to set them free. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the village square as the villagers gathered, murmuring softly to one another. They had come to honor Alex, the boy they once feared but now embraced. The tension that had filled the air for months was gone, replaced with an odd mixture of relief and awe. Mike and Jennifer stood quietly at the edge of the square, watching as their son moved through the crowd. Alex, still growing unnaturally fast, towered over many of the villagers, but his posture was relaxed, humble. There was something in his eyes, something that spoke of an understanding beyond his years. Today he was not the child abandoned in the henhouse or the strange boy they whispered about. Today he was a hero. "Thank you," a villager said, stepping forward. "You saved us when we were lost. We were wrong to ever doubt you." The words came hesitantly, like they were testing unfamiliar ground. Alex only smiled, nodding in acknowledgement, but said nothing. He had learned that words were not always necessary. Jennifer squeezed Mike's hand as they watched. "It's strange," she whispered. "We spent so long protecting him from them. And now they see him as one of their own," Mike finished. His voice was steady, but Jennifer could hear the pride in it. A small girl with wide eyes approached Alex, tugging at his sleeve. "Are you really a messenger of God?" she asked innocently. For a moment, Alex seemed taken aback. He crouched down so that he was eye level with the girl. "No," he said softly. "I'm just Alex." The girl smiled and ran back to her parents. Jennifer felt a tear prick her eye, but she quickly blinked it away. There was no need for tears today. Today was for celebration. As the ceremony came to a close, the villagers gathered around Alex, showering him with small tokens of gratitude. Homemade bread, carved wooden figures, simple things that carried deep meaning in this isolated village. They no longer saw him as a curse, but as a gift, someone who had brought them hope during a time of despair. Mike stepped forward then, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "Come on, son," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Let's go home." Inside, the house felt lighter, almost as if it had exhaled a long-held breath. As they sat down for dinner, Alex glanced between his parents. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, "for everything." Jennifer reached across the table, taking Alex's hand in hers. "We've always been proud of you, Alex. Not because of what you did today, but because of who you are." Mike nodded in agreement. "Family sticks together," he added, "no matter what." And, though Alex continued to grow at an alarming rate, they no longer feared it. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. Tomorrow, the villagers would call him a hero. But tonight, in the quiet warmth of their home, Alex was simply a son, loved and accepted. Alex sat quietly at the dining table. Tomorrow, he is going to see Dr. Robert to find a treatment for his illness. Alex's eyes wandered, landing on the small photographs lined along the wall. Memories of a time when life was simpler. A younger version of himself smiled back, though he now hardly recognized that boy. "Hey," Mike's voice broke the silence, turning to his son with a gentle smile. "You all right?" Alex looked up, offering a small nod. "Yeah, Dad. Just thinking." Jennifer moved closer, her expression tender yet concerned. "About tomorrow's medical exam?" Alex nodded again, letting out a slow breath. "It made me realize how lucky I am. You and Dad, you've done so much for me. I don't even know how to begin repaying that." Mike chuckled, wiping his hands on a towel before tossing it over his shoulder. "You don't owe us anything, kid. You've been our joy, our pride, every single day." But Alex felt the weight of those words. He had seen the lines of worry that had deepened on their faces over the years, the quiet conversations they thought he hadn't overheard. His illness had been a shadow, always looming, but never acknowledged out loud. Tonight, however, he couldn't let it remain unspoken any longer. "I know what the future holds for me," Alex began, his voice steady though his heart raced. "I know the illness will keep progressing. I'm going to age faster, but I want you to know—" He paused, glancing between his parents. "I'm not scared. Not anymore." Jennifer's lips quivered slightly as she took a seat across from him, her hand reaching for his. "Alex, I mean it, Mum." He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "I promise you both I'll always be here for you like you've been for me. Whatever time I have left, it'll be with you, and that's all that matters." Mike stepped closer, his strong hands resting on Alex's shoulders. "We're in this together, Alex. Every step." Alex smiled, feeling the warmth of his family surrounding him. He could see the worry in their eyes, but more than that, he could feel the love that bound them together. It wasn't just about facing the disease. It was about facing everything that lay ahead with the strength they had as a family. Despite the looming challenges of his illness, the future felt lighter, more hopeful. No matter what came next, Alex knew that with Mike and Jennifer by his side, they could face anything. Together. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of Alex's journey, an emotional story of resilience, family, and love. As we just saw, Alex may face an uncertain future, but the bond he shares with his parents, Mike and Jennifer, gives him, and all of us, hope. It's a powerful reminder that even in the most challenging times, the strength we find in our loved ones can make all the difference. If this story touched your heart as much as it did mine, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more heartfelt stories just like this. And let me know in the comments, how would you face a challenge like Alex's? What keeps you grounded when times are tough? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay strong, stay connected, and remember, the power of family is everything.